Ebenezer Scrooge was a cold man. He lived a cold life to a fault. Kept the light dim because it was cheap and he liked it that way. Christmas would pass each year and he'd let it pass quietly, even with the increased demand for the poor's barest needs. After all, he, Scrooge, had nothing to fear. The day before Christmas, Scrooge was at his office as usual, keeping a close eye on his employee Bob Cratchit. Scrooge's nephew Fred stopped by the very day for a visit. Each year, he would invite his uncle to join the family in their Christmas merriment. Each year, Scrooge declined. He chided his nephew. "What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "What reason have you to be dismal, uncle? You're rich enough." "Bah, humbug." "Don't be cross, uncle." Fred left the room, and to Scrooge's great annoyance, he and Bob exchanged hearty season's greetings with each other. Just as Bob let Fred out, he let two other portly gentlemen in. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these past 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night." I do trust his liberalities will be represented by his surviving business partner. It's best to make some charitable provision for the poor and destitute at this time, as their need is keenly felt." "Are there no prisons, union workhouses, and the poor law? Have they been stopped in their useful course?" "No, sir, they are indeed busy." "Ah, good. I feared the worst." "Under the impression these institutes hardly provide for their membership, we are here to buy the poor some food and clothing in these hard times. What shall I put you down for?" "Nothing." "You wish to remain anonymous?" "No, I wish to be left alone. You'll receive no charity from me." "But, sir, there are many with no place to go and not to eat. They'd rather die than go to the workhouses." "If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population." The gentleman left, and Scrooge shut his door to be left alone from the world. As the day was ending, Bob Cratchit had worked up the courage to ask Scrooge the very thing he wanted to ask all day. "Sir, we are slow indeed, and I would ask that tomorrow I have the day off to spend with my family. Christmas comes but once a year, and it would be an excellent gesture." "You want the day off, but I shall still be paying you. Is that the idea? Not a very good deal on my end. Might you rob my accounts just the same? Have the day off? I think not." And with that, Scrooge was off to his home. Off alone. Scrooge arrived home as it was getting dark. He walked up to his door without a thought of the day's events in mind. He went to open the door, and the doorknob wasn't a doorknob at all. It was Jacob Marley's face. Scrooge's stomach jumped up into his throat, and just as he looked back to challenge this doorknob, it was gone, and he was left alone with the original. Must be my imagination playing tricks on me. But he locked the door, and even double-locked it, which was not his standard. Scrooge would sit down and do his best to ignore the days passing. But living alone in such a large house, it's easy to frighten oneself. Scrooge's door burst open, and the flames of his small fire leapt up as if to say, "I know him, Marley's ghost." Humbug. I won't believe it. "It is me, Jacob Marley, your partner in life. I, who was then as greedy as you are now." Why should I believe you? Any small piece of ill food could trick me into such visions. Surely you're a concoction for my mind. I have walked this earth in these chains for 7 years. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Tell me what to do, old friend. Marley raised his finger to hush Scrooge. He beckoned him come forward. Heard their awful voices, and it was clear to him. They only wanted one thing, to save the living from themselves. With that, Marley slowly faded off, and not quickly, but eventually, Scrooge fell asleep. Or at least he tried to sleep. Sure enough, Marley was true to his word, and Scrooge was shortly visited. It was a strange figure like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. I am the ghost of Christmas past. And the spirit took Scrooge by the hand, and the room vanished. I know these roads. I was raised here. The school is not quite deserted. A lonely child sat reading by a feeble fire. Just as the boy put down the book, they were in a different room, dirtier than before. A small girl darted into the room and flung her arms around the boy, addressing him as dear brother. I have come to bring you home, dear brother. To bring you home, home, home. Home for good and all. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home is like a heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, yes you should, and we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world. She spoke true, and that entire Christmas we were together as the merriest family. She died a woman and had, I think, children. One, your nephew. Warehouse, his old workplace, Fezziwig's, and it was good to see Fezziwig alive again. Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight! Christmas Eve, Dick! Christmas Ebenezer! Let's have the shutters up before a man can say, Jack Robinson! It was a party to be sure at Fezziwig's. Anything could and would be cleared to make room for the merriment. The party went on, and Scrooge enjoyed himself as if he was experiencing everything for the first time. Although something was bugging him, an irritation he couldn't ignore. Small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. So small? What's the matter? I should like a word or two with my clerk. saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life, not alone, but by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress. Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until in good season we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are not the man you were when it was made. Your own feeling tells you that you were not what you are. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You who, in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain. Or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle, do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were. Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? Remove me from this place. I told you these were shadows of the things that have been, that they are what they are. Leave me, take me back. Haunt me no longer. Our contract is an old one. It was made in another time. Father is so much kinder. Home is like a heaven. It was made in another time. Father is so much kinder. Home is like a heaven. It was made in another time. Father is so much kinder. He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which in some strange way there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, he wrestled with it. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the ghost a final squeeze, in which his hand relaxed and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Father is so much kinder. There was a great light coming from the next room over. "Come in and know me better, man. I am the spirit of Christmas present. You have never seen the like of me before." Bob Cratchit's place, the family was arriving for their meal, after all finishing their appointed tasks, not least important of which was Master Peter, who went to fetch the goose. When they arrived, such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds. And in truth, it was something very like it in that house. Then came in little Bob, with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. The two little Cratchits bore him up and bustled him off into the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch. Little Tim was as good as gold today. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made beggars walk and blind men see. At last, the dishes were set on, and the grace was said. The feast began. Bob said he didn't believe there was ever such a goose cooked. And the pudding, it was enough that Bob Cratchit said it's the greatest success since our marriage. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us, which all the family re-echoed. God bless us, everyone, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live. I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. No, kind Spirit. Say he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, what then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit. Still feeling sorry for himself, it was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to recognize it as his own nephew's. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live. He believed it too. I know most of you have no patience with him, but I do. I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return and thanked them in an inaudible speech. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last word spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. It was a long night, if it were only a night. It was strange that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. A spirit's lives so short. My life upon this globe is very brief. You'll be visited by the final spirit next. And with that, Scrooge could no longer see the specter. When Scrooge lifted his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. You are ghost of Christmas yet to come, spirit of the future. I feared you more than any specter I have seen. The spirit moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up and carried him along. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. Nope. I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Last night, I believe. Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer. I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make one. Scrooge knew the men, but was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to a conversation apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. Next, the spirit brought Scrooge to an obscure part of town. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched. There was a low-browed parlor where iron, old rags, bottles, and bones were bought and sold. What odds then? What odds, old Joe? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for you to see it. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. What do you call this? Bed curtains and a shirt? Yes, bed curtains. You don't mean to say you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there? Yes, and why not? He isn't likely to take cold without him, I dare say. Look at that shirt through and through, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting of it? Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now, merciful heaven. What is this? He now stood by the side of a bare, uncurtained bed on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. The phantom's hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the phantom at his side. Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Let us go. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. Then came in little Bob in his comforter. Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. They drew about the fire, and Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew Fred, on which, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard. I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, that's where I live. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way, that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our little Tim and felt his loss with us. Spirit, something tells me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me, what man was that whom we saw lying dead? The ghost of Christmas conveyed him, as before, to a churchyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it trembling, though the spirit was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be only? Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and followed the finger. Read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, Spirit, no. Hear me, I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes. And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as that good old city knew. He had no further intercourse with the spirits, And it was always said of him that he knew how to treat Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.